I used to have a 2,000 book library. My church office had custom bookcases and nice furniture, making it a pretty comfortable place to hang out. But that was until a vocational tsunami engulfed my life. My tsunami friend Bob is a church outsider, and I officiated at his wedding. Without realizing it, he set me to thinking about whether I would ever invite him to my church. I concluded that I wouldn't. And it eventually ended my 15-year ministry at that church. When looking for an alternative to my jettisoned ministry, I ignored the church consultant who told me to hang it up, you're too old. This led me to a church planting organization which loves it when a mature pastor wants to plant a church. People that come with wisdom and experience, albeit bad knees. In 2005, after parachuting into Merced, which means without a team, I followed the advice of a church planting mentor who advised me to look for 10 places to connect to my new city. Chamber of Commerce membership was first, then Leadership Merced. This led to membership in a business networking group, chaplaincy at a local hospice, blessing dogs, and Christmas trees. Eventually leading to chairing 2 city committees pertaining to building fees and zoning regulations. One day it dawned on me that I was giving 100% of my time to outsiders. I was no longer in a paneled office, but outside in Starbucks, which is where I office. And I discovered that I was finally able to give expression to the longing that Bob had released in me, all without realizing it. Because now I was freed from the demands of an often spoiled and consumeristic church. And the farther out my connections rippled, the more significant my conversations became. Eventually, 13 people called LifeSpring home indirectly because of that business networking organization. And Starbucks, which is a great office, by the way, led me to a UC professor of philosophy who once told me that he was afraid to die. And later, he invited me to read and discuss Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling with him and a shared Buddhist friend. One of my best friends is an atheist, and he has the same cancer I do. So my friend Lee is the person who told me to go to UCSF for treatment. And now we carpool to our shared appointments, during which we talk about politics and marriage and religion, and we always look for good restaurants to eat at before our return home. I would have never, ever gotten to know Lee inside my paneled office, which would have made me a much, much poorer person. Early in the days of Off the Map, Jim used the phrase ordinary attempts. In fact, I moderated his Ordinary Attempts blog, which further developed this idea in me. An ordinary attempt is anything that a Christian does to show interest and care for another person. Holding the door, saying hello, buying him or her coffee, and other kind gestures. Ordinary attempts have been for me the best way to be a Jesus follower in the world. They paved the way for conversations that would never occur in the way that Christians usually respond to the world. There's no evangelism goal in an ordinary attempt, and it is amazingly disarming to people who do not expect to be treated that way. One Monday morning, I was getting my usual cup of coffee at Starbucks and chatting up the barista who was serving me. "How was your weekend?" I asked. "It was okay," she responded. "Although I had to work Sunday morning and I hate that." "Why?" I asked. "Because of the way the customers treat you." She was talking about the flood of customers from one of 3 or 4 large churches in the vicinity of that Starbucks. An ordinary attempt respects and honors the individual to whom it is extended. Doors open that otherwise would not be open. I've performed marriages for young couples as well as last rites for an old woman. I grew up in a tradition that doesn't even do last rites. I've baptized folks, none of which would have gone to an existing church in town because of the prejudices they have about church. And I, not too terribly long ago, blessed my first house for a good friend. Between June 2015 and May 2016, I completed the one-year American Leadership Forum program. Completion makes you a senior fellow in ALF and connects you to an extremely diverse group of people. There was Filipino, Hmong, Assyrian, Vietnamese, Hispanic, African American. This was all in my cohort. Gay, straight, liberal, conservative, believer, atheist, male, female, wealthy and not. All in that little group. And it was a life-changing experience for me. I mean, I grew up being sheltered in church, right? And all of a sudden, here I am sitting with the world. And it proves some things to me that you don't get to see very often. The first is that there are some things in life that you will never experience until you suspend talking and just listen. I witnessed this in a conversation between a female African American professor and a white male business owner on the subject of white privilege. The second is that when you quit treating people like projects, which we're so good at, they start treating you like a partner. Back in the 90s, a friend I had lost track of called me one day. "Rod, it's so great to hear your voice. How in the world are you?" I exclaimed. After a brief exchange, he asked me to buy a health supplement from his wife and told me how to go online to make the order. I instantly knew how people feel who discover that the friendship they thought they had with us was actually a pretense for the real intention. I no longer believe that Rod regards me as his friend. On our 6-day, 5-night ALF retreat, my tent mate was a gay man. He took the risk of asking me to be his tent mate. It blows me away. At our graduation party, I was introduced by one of my classmates as Bruce. He's a pastor, and he drinks with us. It's one of my favorite things that's ever been said about me, and it was meant entirely as a compliment. And in both cases, I'm so humbled by what I have seen and experienced in the lives of these classmates. Parachute drops have a high rate of failure. Some say 80% in the first 5 years. LifeSpring's now 11 years old. I think there are two factors. One is not having a salary that will sustain you. Bev, my wife, graciously supplied that. The other is the built-in assumption that if it doesn't work, we'll leave. We'll go do something else. I think folks pick up on that. But when you invest 100% in people, and they sense your unconditional commitment to them, things change. Thank you.